Welcome. It is week 3. This is EDSC 520 Educational Assessment. I'm Professor Bobo. It is week 3, July 12th through the 18th. This week, you'll have your first assignment that is due, plus 3 additional chapters to read, chapters 7, 8, and 9. You have an overview reflection for a discussion board and your Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. So this assignment, you are to take the online Myers-Briggs personality and then write a 3 to 5 page essay about, in APA format, about that particular test, your results, and all of the things that are on that testing. In chapters 7, 8, and 9. 7, we talked about selecting, administering, scoring, and communicating those results to your clients. And it went over the procedures of what needs to be identified, what information is needed. So we need to explain to our clients the information needed, why they're taking that particular test. Consider that the information that's already available, analyzing the strategies for obtaining the information, whether it should be formal or informal techniques, consider which assessment methods would be best suited for the client, and considering professional limitations for it. Also, we needed to talk to our clients about what is the purpose of that particular instrument. Why was it developed? Its appropriate selection for norming, grouping, or criterion, and its reliability. Also, the validity of the test, how fair it is, the user's qualifications, like your qualifications for being able to give them that particular test, and practical issues. There, talked about the scoring and the importance of the type of scoring and being able to communicate that effectively to your client. In chapter 8, we talked about initial assessments in counseling, that your initial intake interview should gather information such as demographics, client's background, health and mental history, the presenting concerns, and other relevant information. You need to define the client's problem in this initial intake and assess the intensity of the problem and to what degree that the client believes that the problem can be changed, and what were some previous strategies that they used to try to solve the problem. When you're interviewing your client, some important factors that you need to take into consideration: your credibility. Are you trustworthy? Do you seem like an expert in your field? You should be using open-ended and closed-ended questions. You should also use paraphrasing, clarifying, reflecting, interpreting, and summarizing. And then also be aware of verbal and nonverbal cues. It gave us some additional tips on interviewing children, like establishing a rapport, being familiar with them, adjusting the question according to the ability of the child and its developmental level, asking questions in a warm and professional manner, defining the limits of confidentiality. That's always important. Letting them know what you can reveal and what you can't reveal. Structuring the interview to be developmentally appropriate, like do you need toys and different props in order to keep their attention and get them to answer questions. An example of this, we have a student who doesn't like to sit still. So as long as we can give her questions and she is up and around and moving and has things in her hand, she's more able to answer the question correctly. If you have her sitting down in a desk, she's less likely to answer the questions and less likely to demonstrate her knowledge of a particular assessment test. using a variety of different types of questions is important. Avoid abstract because kids are not able to do that. And don't stop a child's disruptive behavior too quickly. It talks about structured and unstructured interviews. The structured ones are when there's a set of questions and you're going to be asking those same exact questions to each and every person to try to get reliability on something. And unstructured is when it's the interview is conducted on the unique needs of your specific client. So that is chapter 8. And then in chapter 9, we talked about intelligence and general ability testing, and gave us some models of intelligent testing. We really don't use those as much due to the fact that they can't be used, it's allowed to be used with African American students. So we try to use other tests that kind of measure the same thing in order to get similar results. All right, so it went into the different types of intelligent testing that you may have heard of, that psychologists mostly use. This chapter helps us to understand the different types of testing that psychologists use and how they come up with their scores for determining whether a student is eligible or not eligible for special education. In different districts, you will hold a different position. So some counselors are included in the IEP processes in certain districts, and other counselors in other districts are not. I happen to be the collaborator for the student success team. So I organize the student success team meetings, and there is where we will maybe refer a student as a group for psychological assessment, but educational assessment. But that is a group decision, and it's based on the information that we've collected. So my number one goal is making sure that I have the documentation that supports that the child should be assessed educationally for a deficit of perhaps some sort. And it's important that you have a lot of examples of interventions that are necessary. So there is no set time. A lot of people say, well, we have 2 student success team meetings and then it should go to educational assessment, psychological assessment, but you really just need to collect the data, and the data needs to be solid. So an example of that is the fact that we've been in this COVID situation. So we shouldn't have very many students going through that SST process because we haven't really had a full year of normalness. So everyone is working outside of the parameters. With the virtual learning that has occurred over the last 15 months or so in education, many students may have fallen behind, even some of our great students. So we want to make sure that we, before we send someone on for educational psychological assessment, that they really meet that criteria. And since school hasn't been in its normal mode, it's hard for us to determine, and it's hard for a psychologist to determine that the student would qualify for special education services. So this is something to keep in mind when things major like this happens. So if you're holding an SST, you would just be holding it just to communicate the interventions that you're using and the success or that you have with those interventions. All right. So those are the things that we want to focus on this week in week 3. So again, you're reading those 3 chapters. That's chapters 7, 8, and 9. And then you're doing your weekly overview reflection for your discussion board. And you have your first assignment due, your Myers-Briggs personality type available assignment.